change the world. On we go.
Hello, welcome back to Coffee Over Apples. My name is Steph. I just got a new microphone for filming, so let me know what you think of the sound quality of this video. I feel like usually I tend to project my voice a little bit more. I prefer not to talk as loudly, so if this picks up the sound of my voice better than my previous videos, I will continue to use it going forward. If not, I'll just switch back to the regular microphone that I was using before. But let me know in the comments of what you think of the sound quality of this video. This is a wrap up for September. September was an interesting month because I feel like my ratings were kind of all over the place. I believe I'm just going to pull some stats really quickly. So in the month of September, I read 5 books, which is not the most books that I've ever read, but also not the least books that I've ever read. It's just like, okay. I read 2 digital books or 2 audiobooks, and the other 3 were physical. The 3 physical books that I read were Mapping the Interior by Stephen Graham Jones, Little Heaven by Nick Cutter, and then also Certain Dark Things by Sylvia Moreno Garcia. These 3 ended up becoming part of a vlog, which will be coming out in October as a horror-themed reading vlog. I also read Dune Messiah, which is the second book in the Dune series, and I read this because some friends asked me to, and I was genuinely curious. And the other one was They Were Here Before Us, which is a novella written by Eric Larocca. So there will be an Eric Larocca specific vlog coming out in October, like an Eric Larocca taste test reading video. And my ratings were a little bit all over the place. I had a 5-star, a 4-star, 2 3-stars, and a 2-star. I'm going to begin with talking about the positives. I was thinking about the way that I arrange my wrap-up videos. I think I want to start with talking about the positives and then end with the negatives. That being said, if you don't like hearing negative reviews about books that you really like, maybe you want to skip that part. But I'm going to start with my highest rated book first. My highest rated book of September was Little Heaven by Nick Cutter. I ended up giving this a 5-star. And I also filmed a dedicated review video for this, which will also be going out in October. This might just be one of my new favorite horror books ever. It genuinely scared me. It genuinely made me put it down a couple times. And that, I think, is the markings of a really good horror book, especially when there are characters that I am invested in. You can see how much I tab this, right? There's so many tabs of things that I just enjoyed. There are illustrations in here which are very creepy, to say at the least. And it's kind of old school in the way that it has these illustrations. I don't want to show you too many because I don't want it to get too spoilery. But as a general summary, we are following 3 mercenaries, Micah, Ebenezer, and Minnie. And a weird series of events kind of brings these 3 mercenaries together in a situation where they were kind of going to kill each other, but then they end up on the run together. And while they're looking for work on the run, they end up with this really shady deal where they're asked to go to a religious compound and help do a rescue mission for a child. And things are happening on this land that are just not okay. Religious cults. It's set in the 1960s majoritively, but we have 2 timelines that we follow, and it's so creepy. I think I've said this in the other videos that I filmed, but think of it like The Thing kind of meets The Mist, kind of meets some really famous documentary series about 1960s Western cults, because this takes place in New Mexico. Honestly, just think about it as like a horror Western. This was on my 5-star predictions list, and I was so happy that I was right. Genuinely a terrifying time. I don't know who I would recommend this to, but if you're someone who's interested in some extreme horror, maybe it's something worth looking into. It's also a bit of a historical fiction in that way because it's got a lot of things that happen as far as religious cults, again, set in the 1960s. So if you're familiar with any of that history, you're going to find a lot of references here. So many things that are horrible about society are very much abundant here. So, yeah, just go into this. Beware. I don't know what trigger warnings to give you. It's got every kind of trigger warning. But I love monsters, and this did monsters very well. So, if you want monsters, horror, Western, religious cults, guns for hire, extreme horror, horrible characters, anybody could go. There's this, which is great. I absolutely loved it. Moving down the list to the book that I rated 4 stars in September is Mapping the Interior. What was this? It was so fun. Stephen Graham Jones has yet to. Kitty, what are you doing? If you hear prancing in the background, my cats have the zoomies. Stephen Graham Jones has not let me down. This is the second book that I've read by him. I believe the first book I rated 4 stars. This one I'm also rating 4 stars. It's a novella, very short, just over 100 pages. We're following a young boy who's about 12 years old, living on a reservation with a younger brother who is suffering from seizures and a single mom who she's working so hard to provide for her boys, but there's only so much she could do because she needs another parent in the home. Something happened to the father where the father passed away, and it really focuses on that idea as a child that we have from various cultures of the dead are there to look after us. And so while the child believes this, is also seeing things at night due to sleepwalking out of the peripheral vision when they awaken, the silhouette of what they believe is their father. Strange things happen. There is gore, there is harm to animals, there's a lot of violence. And it's like anytime something happens, they think that they see their father present to solve it, but are they really solving it? And his view is very skewed of the horrific events that are happening because he is hopeful as children do. They want only good things to happen and they're not really able to imagine. Oh, Kitty, please stop shaking the camera. Stop shaking the tripod, baby. No, no, no. Ma'am, no, no, what are you doing? As children do, they're not able to imagine all of the horrible possibilities that could happen with if spirits actually come back from the dead and why would they be coming back? Or are these spirits or are they, this is just their child mind trying to make sense of what the adults around them are doing. It's so well done. And the tension that is built up along the way, you just want what's best for them. Ultimately, I ended up rating this 4 stars because I had such a great time with it and I was invested in the well-being of the main characters. Should I have been? Should I not have been? That is for you to find out. Moving on to the next book that I think going down the list, 5 stars, 4 stars. Now let's go to the 3 stars. I have 2 3 stars this month. The first one that I want to talk about was the sci-fi pick for the Interstellar Book Club, which is the sci-fi book club that I run. And we read Certain Dark Things by Sylvia Moreno Garcia. This is much more horror and police noir than it is sci-fi. I'd say like sci-fi is lower on the priorities for this book because it really just has like kind of cyberpunk setting. But we're following a vampire in Mexico City named Atla, and they are descendant of a family of vampires that are descendants of the Aztecs. So we get a lot of language in here and characters and places that reference the Nahuatl language. And there's other kinds of vampires from Europe. We get some kind of classical vampires. So this really was, I think, Sylvia Moreno Garcia's like nerd project of just how much she loves vampires and names things after famous vampires in different kind of like Latina media. Um, it's got some gore. It's a fun time. My favorite character was Domingo. I loved him so much, and he is the sweet young man who is homeless and just like wants to be loved and have a normal life. Ends up getting roped in with Atla and needs to, as her Renfield, and ultimately needs to help her leave the city because she's fleeing another gang of vampires that her family had beef with. I liked this for its action, and I liked this for how much that I love Domingo. I wasn't really that invested in the plot, and that's because there were just some characters that I didn't like. And if the story's following around their whole like chase of for trying to catch each other and solve their mafia problems, I didn't care about them. So it didn't grip me in that way. All I cared about was seeing what happened to poor little Domingo. So I just, I mean, I also really liked Rodrigo, who was the Renfield to the villain who from this mafia called the Narcos, which is like vampires that give people their blood and they kind of turn into zombies in a way. He was an older man, and that was fun to get his perspective. He's like, I just want to retire. I don't want to be here anymore. I don't want to deal with these vampires. This whole thing is stupid, but I need money. After this, I'm going to try to figure out a way to get myself out of the mafia, whatever the case is. Who would I recommend this for? I guess if you like Blade Runner, you'll like this. Blade Runner, I adore as a movie. But like make it Latine, I guess. I don't even know if that's accurate to say. And then add vampires. Don't know. Kinda. This feels like a really bad review, but anyway, I've got an entire vlog that I'm doing for this video, so I give it 3 stars. While I enjoyed Domingo and Rodrigo, there was just plot that I didn't care for and vampire info dumping, which had I known sooner that there was a vampire index in the back, that would have probably solved a lot of my issues, but there was in-text info dumping that wasn't learned through the characters. So another 3-star that I listened to on audio was They Were Here Before Us. It's hard to rate short stories because each story is kind of its own individual thing. This followed a theme. I don't know what that sound is. What is that sound? What are you guys doing? Oh my god, my cats. It's like following a theme of non-traditional POVs, so various levels of animals in the animal kingdom. What is happening? Beerus, no, woman. I just saved one of my favorite mugs from being knocked off the table. Okay, try this again. They Were Here Before Us is different animal POVs at different levels of the animal kingdom, starting from the small, working its way up to people. This was strange. What I think worked for this for me was the last story and also a story in the middle. And had the rest of the book been like those 2 stories, I would have given this a 5-star because I gave those 2 individual stories 5 stars. However, the other stories that were in it, I gave either 2 stars or 1 star. So I'm meeting it all in the middle with 3 stars overall for this book. I don't know how to describe this other than it really is about lust and fetishization relationships, but somehow ties it all into family. So like what we do for family or who we consider to be our family based upon our own levels of bodily needs. Like we have marriages, we have a chosen family, we have like scenarios in which the characters really have to question how far they're willing to go in order to keep their family members satisfied or to satisfy their own fetishizations. it's interesting. It's I don't really enjoy torture porn on like long stretches of time. There is a certain kind of horror that is grotesque and dark and sexy and torturous, that I can enjoy in snippets, or if there is a particular story that revolves around that and it has segments of that kind of either spread out or in a singular short story format, because I remember reading The Dangers of Smoking in Bed, and there was like a particular story in there that was one of my favorites, and it was kind of around torture porn. Um, but that being said, this felt like that, but for 3 hours or 2 hours. It was a relatively short audiobook, but just back to back, like that kind of was the focus up until the last story, which was very different, but still revolved around family. And I don't know that that is my thing for long stretches of time. I I'm hesitant to say whether that is Eric Larocca's niche, because I kind of experienced it with the other book that I read by them last month, but I'm not going to get into that here. That is what the dedicated vlog that I recorded for this book is for. Making sense, and if you've read other Eric Larocca books, tell me if this is something that you see consistent in the rest of his writing, because here it was like, I don't know what to make of it. And then lastly, in the month of September, this is my 2-star book. So if you've made it to this point and you love Dune and you don't like people talking bad about Dune or like hearing negative reviews about Dune, I'm going to suggest that you leave. Thank you for watching if you made it this far. That being said, the reason that I'm saying that is because I've put out like 2 Dune videos at this point, and if you've been following me, you might know that I really don't like Dune. I really dislike it. It is one of my least favorite books of all time. And I remember when I first started talking about how much I disliked Dune and gave it 1 star during that reading vlog, most of the comments that I got were, "You don't understand it. Um, it's too smart for you. Um, it's a classic. It deserves all the attention that it gets. Like, stop pulling it apart, because the things that I'm pulling it apart have nothing to do with that." And again, this is coming from comments and conversations with other Dune enthusiasts that I've spoken to. Um, so I wasn't gonna read Dune Messiah, but I was always genuinely curious, because some of the criticism that I made of Dune, other people told me, "Oh, that Paul, the main character, is supposed to be a dislikable character. He turns eventually into a villain of some kind, and it talks down on putting a person on a pedestal, and that it's white saviorism is bad at the end of all of this." And I was like, okay, so many people are telling me that that is eventually all going to get addressed. So maybe it's worth, like, just out of my own curiosity continuing it, but it's not something that I ever intended to pick up on my own. I had 2 friends reach out to me and say, "Hey, Steph, we are interested in trying book 2. Do you want to join us for a buddy read?" And I was like, you know what? There is no better time, because at least I'll have someone to rant to. And that's exactly what happened. I ultimately ended up DNFing around 70 something percent, and then just kind of like watching other reviews and reading other reviews and summaries of it online for the ending, because exactly what I thought was going to happen ended up happening. I cannot stand this book. Book 2 is very much a book centered around women's issues, women's place in a patriarchy, women's place in culture, women's place in the home, um, women breaking glass ceilings. Um, and we get that through Princess Irulan, who is like Paul's wife for political reasons, Chani, who is Paul's wife, not for political reasons, but for love, through the Freeman culture, who are the people that are kind of like that he's leading through the jihad and whatever. And then his sister, who is like the female version of him, who is a Bene Gesserit also, who, whatever, all these things. And it's like, this book really is about the women, but we get it's from Paul's POV mostly, and it's just why? Frank Herbert, why? Why? No one who I've ever spoken to about Dune has told me how much women's health is at the center of these books, but no one talks about it because it's not interesting. Everyone talks about the sci-fi, everyone talks about the world building, but nobody talks about the strife that the women go through in order to create a place for themselves in this world, and how they're essentially all being used by Paul, or if they want to assert a kind of voice, that voice of their own is really just like reiterating what the patriarchy has set for them, and it's just so painful. The women's issues that this book really focuses on is like contraception,
infertility,
crimes against women, uh, particular female characters not being able to thrive due to Paul's own jealousy that is not addressed in any kind of way. And I mean that in relationship to his sister, who potentially could be a better quasi cataract than him, which is like the Jesus. Paul is space Jesus, right? And his sister could be a better space Jesus, but he doesn't want that to happen because he's this selfless leader who knows that he shouldn't be the Jesus of this people, but he's like, well, I don't want to be here anymore. I kind of want to leave. This whole thing is stupid. It's bigger than I am. I can't control this. It's out of control. What do I do? Maybe I could just take my wife and leave and go live a happy life. And I'm like, yes, sir. Yes, please leave. But if he left, the story would be over. So he decides to stay, even though he knows everything's going to go to shit. And the women around him are just his wife, for political reasons, is secretly giving contraceptives to his love marriage because she wants him to have a baby with her, but he doesn't want to. I'm going to say he wants to do the right Christian thing. And even though Christianity doesn't exist in this world, there's so much commentary if you go online about like not only this being about a kind of allegory for Jesus, but also being making commentary about Islam, and also and if you have that commentary about Islam and you have a white savior character, I don't think that you can necessarily have that conversation without bringing in a Eurocentric view, and so that being Christianity and Catholicism, and so he's just kind of like, I don't want to do that. That's against my values. But at the same time, like, he's not a great person and he does horrible things, and the way he like thinks about other people is kind of gross, and the way he thinks about his sister is kind of gross. And something that Frank Herbert has done in the first book and again in this book is like little hints of incestuousness kind of being here and there. Our main villain from the first book was a villain who just happened to be gay and just happened to be a pedophile and just happened to be into incest. And it's like, you don't coincidentally put all those things together in one bad guy for no reason. But again, it was the 1960s. Doesn't make it okay? Absolutely not. That wasn't that long ago. There are certain, like, and it's like, well, if that bad guy didn't make it through book one, what are these traits being relevant now? Like, why is Paul also showing small signs of this? But, nobody talks about that. Everybody talks about the spice and the politics. And it's like, yeah. That's happening. That's interesting. But at the forefront of all of this are the women who are suffering with serious women's issues issues that are relatable to many women and they're not being handled with any nuance. Again, because we get it mostly from Paul's POV. I don't know if this is making any sense. I'm debating if I want a dedicated review about Dune Messiah. I also know that if I make that video, it's probably going to get a lot of hate simply because, 1, I'm a woman, 2, I didn't like it, 3, I am Latina. So, do I feel like doing that? I don't know. But I digress. I could probably talk about this for another 10 minutes, but I'm not going to. Those are the 5 books that I read in September. If you want to hear me talk about any of the other books aside from Dune Messiah in more detail, just keep an eye out for those vlogs that are coming up. Like and subscribe, I guess, so that you can get a notification when those videos comes out. But I post videos whenever I feel like posting it because that's how creativity works. See you later. Bye.
On we go.